Welcome everyone to our second webinar. We are the New Jersey Coalition for Learners, a nonprofit committed to advocating the education conversation through advocacy, resources, and support for our families across the state. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website at njlearners.org. All content produced by the New Jersey Coalition for Learners, including but not limited to presentations, webinars, written materials, and resources, is protected by copyright law. Reproduction, distribution, or any other form of use of our content without explicit written consent from the New Jersey Coalition for Learners is strictly prohibited. Our webinars are recorded for internal purposes, and attendees are prohibited from screen recording, capturing audio, video, or any other form of recording during the session. Unauthorized recordings or distribution of our webinar content will be subject to the action by the organization. By participating in our webinar, you agree to comply with these terms. So please take a moment if you haven't, although I think most everybody already has, our public Facebook page and get to know everybody in the private Facebook groups. We'll post links in the chat and they can easily be found on the homepage of our website as well. Go ahead, Kai. Oh,
Okay, you were not allowing me to
sorry.
unmute. So I'm unmuted. Now I have to pull over the disclaimer. Okay, this webinar is intended for informational purposes only and does not constitute professional, legal, or educational advice. The New Jersey Coalition for Learners provides opportunities for open discussions on various topics at no cost to families. All conversations, guidance, and information shared are meant to inform, but should not be relied upon as a substitute for consulting with qualified professionals in legal or educational fields. Additionally, NJCL does not endorse or promote the views, opinions, or expertise of any panelist or speaker. Panelists are invited to share their perspectives, and their participation does not imply agreement or alignment with NJCL's mission or stance on any topic. And with that, I think we can introduce the webinar and just get going. So this month, yep.
1 second, because some people did join a few minutes late. You do have the option to rename yourselves if you would like to be anonymous. That way you protect your own identity. And you also have the ability to make sure, your photo is not visible in video. So go ahead.
Okay, so let's introduce the webinar tonight. So last month, if you joined us, we had an attorney talking about the differences between 504s and IEPs. And, most months we are going to introduce a topic and have an expert panelist. And, but this month we wanted to try something different because there's so many parents that come to the page and they kind of just want to share their story. So this month we wanted to hear directly from, members in our group who were willing to talk and share about some of the challenges that you guys have, or even some of the successes, things that have worked in your own advocacy with your own kids. So we sent out a survey to try to gauge like the most pressing questions. And tonight we're going to dive into those questions right after. Deanna, you've already let everybody know how to remain anonymous. So can you just let them know how to raise their hand if we need to rename somebody who ends up wanting to participate anonymously?
Yep. Raise your hand at any time and I will unmute you. If you wish to have me rename you, you can send me a direct message in the chat and I will rename your icon for yourselves. iPhone, I know you just joined. We just went through all the rules for our webinar. Know this meeting is recorded and we did provide copyright information in the Eventbrite. No one is allowed to record our meetings and or share what goes on inside these webinars.
Okay, so let's get into the first question we asked. And if It's your question. Feel free to raise your hand and jump in. We'll call on you guys in the order that questions were received. So the first question we asked on the survey was, what are the biggest challenges you or your learner, we love to call them learners because we just feel like learning is lifelong. And, our kids go to school and they're supposed to learn. And they're supposed to learn so many things. And we all know education is about so much more than just academics. So we want to know tonight and talk about some of the challenges that we are facing, in our current system of education and kind of work through some of the solutions together. So here's in order of most popular, we had six bullet points that everybody was interested in overall. Bullying in school climate, large class sizes, lack of individualized attention, access to representation in disputes, burned out teachers, and increasing anxiety and or depression. So these are the six bullet points that most people were interested to talk about. So we want everybody to have an opportunity now. Let's just dig into bullying and school climate. If anybody has any questions or wants to share your experience with bullying, now would be a great time to do so. So let's see if anybody wants to share, because I don't want to sit here and listen to me talk all night. I could talk for 8 hours.
Uh, I know I feel the same way about that. Anybody raising their hands? I don't see anything. So what I'll do is, so we also have the ability, we asked, all right, hold on. Mona is having issues getting in. I don't know if she's on. We were sent some emails for parents who really, they weren't sure if they wanted to come on. I'm just trying to find it. Got a lot of
Was
emails.
there a bullying question from a parent, or should we
There
move?
is a bullying question.
Okay.
Kai, I need you to find that. I'm trying to help Mona.
Oh, yeah, from parent for the webinar. Okay, you want me to read this one
Yep.
and then we can respond to it. Okay. So this one is about bullying. Okay. I did not want to speak, but I wanted to put my story out. I have always thought our public education system was one of the best. As time has gone by, I am questioning it. I am the type of mom who asks my children as soon as we all return home the following: how did your day go? Who did you sit with for lunch? What did you eat for lunch? How much homework did you get? And did you have a good day? Along with these questions my son started with not answering the questions as eagerly as he once did. I didn't think anything of it. I knew my kids would come to me if they had problems. They knew they could come to mom if there was a problem. He didn't. Instead, he tried to harm himself, as he immediately was put into private therapy for this. And lo and behold, the truth was coming out. He was being bullied, not just by students, but also by an adult in the school. He has an IEP. I didn't know what to do, and I still don't know what to do. Do I file for a HIB for student part and a system complaint for staff member? I am at a loss on what to do. Signed, concerned parent. So that's a good introduction to some of the issues we face. And a lot of times we as parents don't find out about bullying until, it's pretty
It's
bad.
almost too late.
Yeah, they hide these things because I think it's embarrassing. And I think that when you don't have, a way out, what are you supposed to do? Just stay home? You can't do that. You're supposed to move. You can't do that. So what are we going to do if this is happening and we find out about it? What is the harassment, intimidation, bullying process? And does it provide relief? Does anybody want to speak to that?
I can,
Otherwise,
I can a little.
Okay, Jody, that would be great. And then I can as well, because unfortunately I dealt with this as well
I
also.
have to.
So yeah, what about him? Like how does a
Well,
family file a HIB?
okay. Well, first of all, it's funny because my husband is the HIB coordinator in his high school. Um, but with a HIB, it has to meet three criteria or two out of three criteria. It has to be a distinguishing characteristic. It has to have a significant impact on the school, the educational day, and of course, a significant impact on the psychological of the child. But those first two are the biggest ones. Is there a distinguishing characteristic that they're being bullied about? And is it affecting their grades and their educational performance? Those are the two big questions that when a parent comes to the HIB specialist or a principal, that's what they're going to ask is, what's the issue? And, you know, it, are those two things being met? And then there is a HIB specialist in school, and then an investigation is done about this. Now, I guess my question for this question is, with much disappointment being an educator, past educator myself, is the bullying connected between um, the teacher bullying and the children bullying this child learner, or are they two separate issues?
We do not know because this was just sent in anonymously. So it kind of just
Okay.
left it as it sounds like two separate issues, but whether they're
Okay.
related, I'm not sure. So how would she or he go about initiating this
So
conversation with them?
I would find out who the HIB specialist in the school is, which usually is a school counselor. How do we know how old the learner is?
Did not
Mm-mm.
say.
Nope.
Okay. Um, because like at the elementary level, um and I can only speak from my experience in my school. We had one guidance counselor, but they weren't a guidance counselor obviously in the elementary school, because guidance counselors at the high school deal with scheduling and things like that. My husband at the high school, he is the students assistance coordinator, so he is the HIB guy. He does the HIB, helps the HIBs and the investigation and the whole process of that. So they would first have to find out who is the HIB coordinator in the school, and and meet with them. And I mean, you can make an administrator aware of any of this at any time. You don't have to follow that protocol. I mean, I would be irate if I were a parent, but I would try to control myself as much as possible. And in trying to find out who the HIB coordinator is, let the administration know that this is what you are going to be investigating. And then that way, administration knows, and then they can put you in touch with who the HIB coordinator is. Now, maybe it's the administrator. Every district is different. But in order to successfully have a HIB um, meet the criteria. I forget what that third one is. I should call my husband up here. But the first two are the big ones. Like I said, is it a distinguishing characteristic, and is it impacting the child's educational performance in school? So, and there is a third one, and I can't remember what that is.
Does that vary by district? So would every district have three criteria, or does that depend on district policy, what they are going to require to meet a HIB? Is that state policy?
No, 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 that's a state policy.
Mhm.
That's not a district by district policy at all. No, that's a state policy.
So to qualify as a harassment, intimidation, bullying, it's got to meet three criteria. Now, let's
Yes.
say, it meets the criteria. What happens next?
then a HIB investigation is conducted. So the children and or the adults involved in the harassment, intimidation, and bullying are called in and interviewed. Um, People who have maybe witnessed but maybe not participated can also be called in and questioned.
So the
And
parents of these kids have to be notified if they're called in to question
it's a
in these
very
investigations.
my husband was up here. Um, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm honestly not sure. He would know. And I could call him up here if you really want me to, but he's like, just be careful. My husband's like, you get involved in so many things. I'm like, oh, will you shut up? So,
Imagine what our
Well, we
husbands
can
think
use
of us
him,
doing this.
because it's an important topic. We can use them, and look, you can turn your camera off
No,
so nobody
no,
can
no. I'll
define
just
him.
ask him really quick. If you can hold on for 1 second. He's
Of
right downstairs.
course.
Hold on 1 second.
And I should have said before Deanna just sent Jody on a run to get her husband. It's a rhetorical question because our daughter was called in as a witness because there was a bus situation and she witnessed, I guess, something the school opened up, and we didn't know she was going to be called in as a witness. And I think she wrote about 5 pages in the assistant principal's office to try, they were kind of prompting her, like, well, what happened over your summer? Because they were neighbors of hers, and we had no idea that that was happening until, of course, she came home and told us.
Those
So,
two, then there's 3 other options, but if it hits those two, it hits those three.
Okay, so all right, stay right here. And so okay, my husband said if it hits those first two,
It's one of those three.
it hits one of those three.
Yeah.
So as if you have those two, then you have a HIB.
Yes, confirmed. Yeah,
Not confirmed, but then you can have an investigation. Do the students and parents need to be informed if they're called in to be questioned?
If a HIB's file, we call the parents.
If you call the parents of the child of the HIB, but if like if you've wanted
file
to,
the HIB,
yeah,
they know the HIB.
right.
We call the other parents.
So even if they're witnesses
We call if they're in the written statement about who
was present, blah blah blah, even if they weren't involved in the actual bullying.
They might not get a call.
Okay.
They might not get a call.
Okay. So parents are called if they are written down involved as being part of the bullying process. Witnesses, who may have seen, they're not necessary. They could be called, but they're not necessarily called. And I would imagine that would vary on the age.
So let me just tell you, our daughter was called, she's 10, as a witness, and we were not notified. And
Okay.
of course, I challenged that. And they said,
Yeah.
well, we're not required to notify you
Right.
when your child, a 10-year-old, right, comes home and tells us before we hear from the school.
Yeah.
So, just that's kind of unfortunate.
I think that's common courtesy.
You
Unfortunately, it's not
think.
the law. It's courtesy, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the law, unfortunately. And that's what a district would say. I'm sure that's what you were told.
And it's not like I would have protested, right? But they were her neighbors, so it put her in a really weird position because she's friends
Sure.
with both of them, and it was
Sure.
just hips are a really messy thing.
Yes, they are. They can be. They are. And it's like, then where do they go?
Well, they don't seem to go very far, and they don't seem, sometimes I guess the behavior stops. But I feel like it takes a lot to meet the criteria to actually be found a HIB.
Well, I think if it hits those first two, then you're in.
For the
And
investigation, right?
correct. Yes, for the investigation. Yes,
And
you're
hopefully it
right.
doesn't make things worse. So I would say to this parent, if you're listening tonight and you do have issues, and you need help with, reaching out to your school or even finding, I think there's some kind of HIB form that you complete, perhaps.
Yeah. Yes.
That we
Yes.
could help you, find, so that it would be a more formal notification if this really is an issue that is affecting your son so adversely or your
Absolutely.
daughter. Did she say son? I feel like she said son.
I think she said some.
Come to the private group. You can post anonymously and we will certainly find you help there. So let's
And there
talk.
have been HIBs filed against teachers. I do know that. So,
Well, yes,
They do
that,
anything to them.
unfortunately,
yeah, and that's a whole nother situation, right? Because now you've got
yes,
a teacher who may be tenured and there's probably different
correct.
criteria you have to meet. So I feel like if this is really an issue, it's a much longer conversation that probably
Yes,
needs, a little bit more in-depth guidance. And
yes.
certainly we have a lot of, advocates and attorneys and parents who have been through this in the private group who can certainly help you figure out how to navigate that because it's kind of turning into an epidemic in our schools.
It
The
is.
culture of just, kids really being, a lot of schools will call it heckling. I don't know, heckling turns into bullying and kids are having a hard time.
You
Yeah,
know what
And
the
it's
sad part
unfortunate.
is, though? They're constantly blaming COVID for it. It was present before COVID.
oh, I
We
know.
just hear about these things more now. It was always there.
Hmm.
COVID didn't
Yeah.
change it, didn't make it. Maybe it made it worse. Yeah, absolutely. You have many different things that were going on that made some kids uncomfortable and made other kids want to tease them. But it's always been there, and it's
Absolutely.
a very big problem in our schools.
And let me say, now that we're talking about this was our first item, but we likely next month we're going to have an attorney join us to talk about how to file HIB. So I think we need a webinar dedicated to this so that if you're experiencing bullying in the
For
schools,
sure.
we need some specific guidance and a presentation on the steps to follow and what
Absolutely.
you can expect from those steps and the timeline. So we're trying to move that up to March, and we'll certainly post when that's available who's going to be joining us to speak more in depth about harassment, intimidation, bullying. So
Fantastic.
let's talk about large class sizes and the lack of individualized attention. I'm going to put those two together because they go together. A lot of our kids are slipping through the cracks because we do have large class sizes in all of our schools. I think a lot of schools have reduced the class sizes now and they really celebrate 24 kids in a class. And if you
I
go to
know I would.
a private school doesn't let you have more than 16 kids to a class, and even 16 is on the high end. So when we celebrate 24, we really have to ask ourselves, is that really a reason to celebrate, or can we do better? Because we know our kids are not getting the individualized attention they need, which is why we fight so hard for IEPs in so many situations. But what about the kids who don't require an IEP, right? Like maybe they don't have a disability, but they still are kind of caught in the chaos of the classroom, and maybe the teacher doesn't notice the bullying going on, or doesn't notice that the child is struggling and trying to compensate for the struggles. A lot
Well,
of times the classes are very noisy, right? Because they've combined, a lot of varying needs. So, who wants to speak to large class sizes and the lack of individualized attention? Because I always say if there's one thing we could do better in our public schools, it is to reduce the class sizes. What's the solution there? And how do we get there? How do we
all
reduce the class
buildings up.
sizes?
That would make, we need to open up old buildings, right? We need to
Mhm.
get more teachers. Why are the teachers running away?
Why?
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 Like, is it because they have too many students in their class?
No.
Is it because the teacher is speaking up and nobody's listening to them? Why are they leaving? Like, we need to bring them back. They are vital.
Well, I could speak to that if it's okay. I don't mean to like monopolize this situation, but again, I'm not retired that long, about 4 years, and um, the workload that has been piled onto the teachers there's hardly teaching going on in the classroom anymore because it's data, it's testing, it's data, it's testing, it's anecdotal notes and where, where's this and where's that, and pressure to the point where, I mean, especially, your young teachers who are just getting into it are like, forget this, I could do something else, and walking away. Um, and even, your older teachers who would say, I would have stayed on for another 10 years, but there's no way I'm doing this anymore. It
Wow.
has become, I mean, teaching was always an all consuming profession. If you are a good teacher, you are constantly thinking about your kids, your class, how can you improve it? And I used to tease my husband, if we win the lottery and we only have enough for one of us to stay home, don't you dare take my teaching away from me. You could stay home and be the house husband. I'm going to work because I love my job. And when I don't know if this is appropriate to say, but like when a certain person started to rule our state and things started to change, and SGPs and SGOs and raises tied to your test grades and everything being published and mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting, that's when you saw the turn. And that's when it became like I used to love to come home and sit on my bed and put on Grey's Anatomy and sit on
Great
Pinterest
teachers.
and look at like all the different things that I could do for my kids and, make Pinterest boards and be like so excited. And like kids that are much older who I'm, still very friendly with and their families remember certain things that we did in the classroom that were fun but tied educationally. You can't have fun anymore in the classroom. You can't do those fun things that you used to be able to do, like my retired friends and I are like, yeah, those were the good old days, when the kids come back and say, remember when we did the pizza portfolios and this, that, and the other thing, and the latkes, and we did the holiday research projects. You can't do that anymore. And so there's, the kids are, if we're feeling the pressure, uh the kids feel the pressure, and it's not fun anymore. It stopped feeding my soul, and my teaching fed my soul. So I think that that's part of the problem with losing the teachers. I can't speak to the class sizes because I think district to district varies on, you
Bigger
know
the district, the bigger
yeah,
the
and redistricting. I mean, I know the district that I retired from, we redistricted 3 times, and I was there in 26, 5 years, and they're talking about it again because all you see is more and more, condos and townhomes and, homes being built, and that's just blowing up the schools, and the schools can't handle all of that. So they're building the first district I taught in is close by where my daughter's day program is. And they've just added on and added on. And there's trailers and trailers and trailers. So, it's a real problem.
So thank you, Jody, for sharing that. What I heard you say is that teaching has and learning has become uninspired, suffocated even by over regulations to include testing, testing, testing. And my question then is, has it benefited us in any way? If we now have more regulations and more testing, are we coming out better? Are we achieving better results at the end of the school aged years due to the regulations and the testing? Because I will say this till I'm blue in the face, it's very different regulations from accountability to
Yes.
outcome.
Oh, yes. Hmm.
And we have a lot of regulations. I feel it, just the difference between the public school and the private school. We still have those things, right? Like the Chinese class in the private school, they make food during class,
Hmm.
and the teachers love their job. They're
Hmm.
happy. So how
We
do we
used to make
bring
food in
that
class.
back to public education?
That's a question for somebody higher than my pay grade. I have
Right?
no,
And we're all here though because we
no
can't answer that
idea.
question, but we
Yeah,
have to ask the question because there
absolutely.
has to be a solution. Because we can't just keep saying regulations equate to accountability. Because if you look at the proficiency scores, right, to the dollars spent, the dollars keep getting more, more. We're up to 12 billion in just income dollars, not even property dollars. And the proficiency scores continue to decline. And it's not because of COVID, because it's been a trajectory of decline.
Um, there was a big movement, and that was the Lucy Calkins movement for reading throughout phonetics. And, for years we had to do uh, this horrible reading program that so many districts adopted, and now they're being sued because they're not. They didn't meet the children didn't meet the criteria. They were turned off by writing. It didn't help them read and be better readers. And we had really effective programs prior to that. So, sometimes I think districts hop on, the latest trends and think that, that's going to make it work. And I think if you are a good educator, you are going to be able to show how your students are or aren't making progress on your own without being overly regulated. That's just my opinion. I mean, I don't work to make the rules, but I mean, my grade book was flawless before all of this came along, and my parents knew before their grades came out exactly where their kids were going to be. So,
So
I
this
don't.
ties into burnt out teachers and increasing anxiety and depression. It really does. Because
Mhm.
what are we doing in these buildings? And this even ties into the next bullet point that the survey came back, which is, dispute resolution. If a parent is saying my kid is not okay, whether they have an IEP or, whatever is going on, a 504 plan or nothing at all, you're going to know if your kid is not doing well. But what is the solution, right? Are we just supposed to say if they're making meaningful progress on this test, then they're okay? But what if they're experiencing increasing anxiety or depression is creeping in? And, we already know our teachers are burnt out. Deanna and I sat on a meeting, I think it was a state board of ed meeting a couple months ago. For every 10 teachers that we used to have coming out of school, we have two. That's
Mhm.
it. So, and they were saying there's this crisis of teacher shortage. And I talk to my teachers, they are under resourced. They cannot meet the needs in their classrooms. Like the
Yeah.
dollars
So
are not
I'm not
getting
saying
into the
anything you don't
classroom.
know.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah.
no. And
Okay.
we
that's
know
it
it.
though. But
And
you're
our
you're retired.
teachers
Hmm.
are
No, go
being
ahead.
thrown away like nothing. And they should never be. They are vital to our public education system. Without them, our children do not walk the halls in those buildings.
Yep. It's sad. I retired early. I mean, a couple years early, took a hit on my pension, and it was well worth it for my mental health. Of course, it wasn't just for me, it was for my daughter as well, who was going into post 21 placement, and that was a lot of work. And what I used to be able to do for my daughter on my lunch hour or on my prep time, you can't even eat your lunch anymore in school. You're so inundated with work. So I could never ever do anything that I'm doing for her now while working. So I also retired for that reason, but it's tough. I don't know the answer.
So right now we have something going on, and a lot of people are at our township committee meeting because they're trying to get money from the town to put in the schools because they're about to cut courtesy busing here because they've run out of money, right? But I know they get $24,000 per kid. So where's the money going?
Right.
Perth Amboy cut all their busing last year.
They're all cutting the busing.
Every day from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., that town is now at gridlock. And again,
Birth Amboy?
times Perth Amboy, they cut the busing. So, you know it. there's kids being moved from
That's a huge,
the
that's the
Budapest
biggest,
section,
yeah.
and they're having to go over on Smith Street all the way by the bridge, and these parents cannot get out to get to work because they're in long lines to drop their kids off. It's
So
crazy.
we had a comment that said the dollars, because it's right. We're trying to figure out why we're losing, why we keep losing services. And transportation is certainly a service that is recognized as, important when it comes to accessing education, right? If you can't get to
Yeah.
school, you're not getting your education. So why the dollars are going, this is a comment from a participant, dollars are going into leadership and fighting parents that are advocating for their children. We can talk about that because when we ask where the money is going, a lot of us know where the money went because
Kai, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are you asking to record again?
no,
Someone is on here as you trying to record.
not me.
That's weird.
Mine still says recording. And just so everyone knows, we had an issue. We did have a participant come on last month and they screen recorded and then they shared it out to a bunch of legislators and tried to cause a lot of problems. And so we had to put this disclaimer up, and now we're just having to be very cognizant of that happening again. Because of course, our participant who helped us out last month did not really agree to have her screen recording shared in our government. It was weird. So, that is not allowed if somebody is trying to do that again. Thank you.
Yeah,
All
well,
right.
I got something going on my screen. Kai, listen to me. If by some chance it boots you, I need you to come back.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. So
I'm
give us
trying
a
to boot
minute,
the
and then
bottom.
we're going to talk about dollars dumping into the courts. It's a good segue because I believe that's where they're going. I just need to find out how to trace all of that. I think if we get them out of the courts, we'll put them back in the classrooms where they belong. And then maybe we have resource teachers and kids receiving more individualized attention and the support that they need. It would be a great start in the right direction. And then maybe we'll be able to hire more teachers and reduce class sizes. They like to keep us there, whether or not education is occurring. They don't let us leave. And they don't give us the support that we need. And that was a question we asked is what resources or supports have helped you the most in advocating for your child's education? And it was noteworthy that we only had 2 replies to that question. And one is finding parents who are also experiencing the same hell. That is a quote. We helped each other. And the next resource that helped was spending over $200,000 to settle after a 2-year battle, only to be headed back to court again. This is a deeply flawed practice. So what those 2 things say to me is that we're leaning on each other. Families are helping families figure out how to navigate this complex landscape. It's the only word we could use for it. It is complex. 3 years ago, I didn't know schools had obligations and I didn't even know we had rights. I thought you just tried to buy into the best district with the best schools. And now I've learned that's even a myth because of the source of funding, which is going to be a separate webinar. We get into these situations where families are filling in holes. There's a supply of private schools families have access to. All the property tax dollars are left behind. So that district is actually able to do a lot more. Because they don't have the kids, but they still have the revenue. So they get the name good school. Really, it's just families who are filling in a lot of the holes. And then, of course, the exact inverse is true in districts that are funded primarily with income tax dollars. If they leave or if they go to a nearby charter school, all the revenue follows. Nothing is left behind. And the families don't always have the same type of access to fill in the holes via tutors or Kumons or, advocating for appropriate services. So unless you have a bankroll to ensure that your child receives an education, it's a roll of the dice because they're graduating these kids without the necessary skills to go out into the world. And it's taking too much out of families, and we're losing too much time in the fight. And it's kind of a misuse of taxpayer dollars to a very large degree to say, hey, taxpayers, you fund the district attorneys in all of these districts, and they're going to end up fighting you when you need more services, right?
Well,
So now your tax dollars are, and then we don't have any representation. We don't get.
Raquel is agreeing right along with you that dollars are going into leadership and fighting parents that are advocating for their children. It's so true. AK says it also feels like taking the district to court and winning isn't really winning. It's not, because it takes time away from other students, right?
Um, Kai, I know you and I spoke last night or messaged back and forth. Everybody knows on here about special education parent advisory councils.
No, I don't
Do we
think
know?
anybody knows your experience. So go ahead and give us,
Because I have two
the short
things.
story.
Yes. All I'm saying is that in the special education code, there is a page that says that, unless it's been taken out since I've looked at it, and I highly doubt that, every Board of Education shall ensure, and that is the word, that a special education parent advisory council is in place to communicate to the administration and the board with and a spectrum from in-class support all the way to self-contained classrooms. It doesn't matter where you fall on that spectrum, number one. So we worked together. I was the chair for 4 years. We were a small group, I said, but we were mighty. We learned a lot about letter writing, and letter writing and letter writing takes a lot of time. And I know, like you said, time is money. Now, we know about Oprah, obviously, yes, and the Open Public Records Act.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you cannot find out what child is in court over what, but I would imagine that you could Oprah the fees that are being spent on legal fights. And the district holds the purse strings, so they get the bulldogs. And our district had a bulldog, thank God. I mean, we ended up using an attorney. It was really almost after I prevailed getting my daughter out of district. Doesn't matter what my story is, but she was so calm. She was like Johnny Cochran. I was like crazy, and she'd be like, just relax. She was so good. But you know, Oprah, what they're spending on their legal costs. I mean, it doesn't have to include any child's name. That would be against, HIPAA violations or whatever. But, you know, that's a simple form you fill out. And, you could bring that to the Board of Education and start there and
And
be
that's a
like,
great suggestion. We have a parent who's very well versed in the Oprah requests. If she's willing
Mhm.
to hop on and let us know, what, or I guess how we initiate that request, because it does matter, right, Jody? Like how you ask the question, we have to be very specific because a lot of times they'll bounce back and say, "Oh, we don't have access because we just got the wrong dates in there, or it wasn't
Right,
specific enough. Maybe it was too broad." But,
right.
district by district, yes, we should be looking at the
Questioning.
numbers and taking that into the board meeting and asking the question. So if you're facing the
Absolutely.
elimination of courtesy transportation, let's find out how much you've just paid out in settlements and your 3 district attorneys that you're paying to drag families into court. Because
Hmm.
there's obligations that they're not meeting. And when they don't meet those obligations, they're kind of silencing us in these settlements. They're giving a big old payout, and then we sign an NDA and we get whatever it is we've agreed to. and that money disappears. I call it the hidden cost of special education because we don't realize how much we're spending in those hidden costs. And so somehow we do have to organize to be able to uncover those costs statewide.
Yeah, and the meetings that they hold before, the private meetings that the public is not available to go into, they're all catered. So how much money are they spending on the catering for all of their private meetings and all
Where
of
the real
their
conversation happens.
yeah, and how much money are they spending on sending out all of their um inexperienced Board of Education members, because some of them just want to get on there for power, and they send them for all these trainings. How much do those trainings cost?
I actually looked at
I-
our agenda and there was a lot of trainings happening among board members
Mhm.
who are probably not even going to be there in 2 years. And they're just going
Yeah.
to start all over again with the
Yep. Yeah.
training.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it doesn't make any sense.
you can't. We used to have. I went to every Board of Ed meeting for 4 years. I rarely missed one. I spoke at almost every
Same,
one with my,
same,
pardon me.
same.
Oh yeah,
I
and
stopped.
we would see somebody come in a suit once or twice, and we'd be like, "Yep, they're going to be running for the board," and yep, they did, and they got on, and they were at one board meeting.
Hmm.
How does that make you experienced in any way, shape, or form?
And I think, and that's so true though. They're good people and they want to do good, right? Their kids are in the district, but I think a lot of times they just don't understand. Like we have got a guy sitting on the special education committee. He doesn't have special ed kids, right? So but then, like, what are we doing? Are we supposed to be coming into these seats and helping out and then have to campaign? The campaign's ugly. Most of us don't have time for these
Very.
campaigns. We want to do, I guess, different things, more meaningful and not, kind of have our hands tied with the duties that you
No,
assume.
no, and nor am I suggesting that whatsoever. I would
No, I
not,
know you're not.
no,
No,
I would
no,
not
you're
want to
good.
sit on that board. But a CPAC, we they called themselves the CPAC, and it was just parent training. And what we went in and we separated out the parent training from the CPAC, because they said, "Oh, we have a CPAC." No, you don't. You have parent training every month. So we separated that out, and they were not happy with us, but we did it. So, that and Oprah is what I would do, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and that's unfortunate. It is.
And that's just it. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. And so what is a family with two working parents supposed to do when their child isn't receiving an appropriate education?
Well, apparently we're supposed to just sit back and do nothing according
Yeah.
to certain people, because our voices should never, ever talk about
Mm-mm.
our experiences. Well, guess what? I have two kids with rare diseases.
Hmm.
Nobody knows them like their doctors and myself.
Correct.
Nobody gets to speak for them at all. And that includes those that think we shouldn't be doing what we are doing. When in fact that story we read at the beginning sounds exactly like mine, except the only difference is for me, it happened during COVID and there was nothing that I could do. It happened when I found out everything, the state shut down. I could not do anything and my time was up.
And
Are
Deanna,
you
you're
talking about the
talking
bully?
about bullying, right?
Yep. Yep. But to file a complaint with the state, everything was shut down. You couldn't send in complaints. You couldn't do anything. And we are the ones still picking up the pieces to all that happened. And the one thing that stood out to me was the parent mentioned by adults in this situation. That was the same thing. So, how many adults in our school systems are bullying kids and nobody knows? Nobody knows about it because that's two, right? That's that story. That's mine also. So I'm curious,
as to how many families are dealing with that. And when I spoke up, they retaliated against us. That's exactly what they did. When I fought back, they thought they'd get smart.
And you got smarter.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, because well, I mean, different story, but
Different story.
we,
However,
they put their hands all over my child with no training, no certification, no notification, no nurses checking her out afterwards. And, um, I mean, like they were using the basket hold on her and she was an asthmatic. They could have killed her. And I didn't know about it until after the ninth time they put it in writing. And that's when they said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want out." They said, "You got it." Because they knew I would have taken them to court. And I recorded that meeting and I messed up the recording when I downloaded. Was before the time of, iPhones. And I just, needed to get it. But they did retaliate. They threatened to call DIFUS on, us, and our psychiatrist said you are absolutely not to send her back into that building. She will have PTSD for the rest of her life, blah 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 blah. And she would come home and say, "Hold me, mommy, hold me tight like Mr. So and so does." It was disgusting. And she was 7, not even
What?
6. Yeah. Um, and I just lost my shit. But and yeah, and so they were going to get me on truancy charges because they wouldn't send her to school. They were supposed to send somebody to my home to educate her. Pfft, they wanted to put her in another classroom in the district. No. So they get smart, you got to get smarter, and you have to document everything.
Did you teach in that same district?
Oh no. No.
Okay, because I was
No.
going to say, if you taught there and they treated you like that, imagine what they're doing to
Mhm.
parents who don't teach there. But no, you didn't teach there.
No,
So
I
that's
didn't teach there, but I have to tell you that I grew up in this area and my parents taught some of these administrators' children.
wow.
Okay, so that made no difference. So, that doesn't make any difference at all. And I was talking to Kai last night that documentation is the key. I still have everything because I said one day I was going to write a book. I still have
You?
every, communication log. I have all my notes, all my phone call notes, every last thing that was ever said, ever done, ever written. And my daughter has autism. So, she would come home like a parrot and sing. She can't make that stuff up. I used to get them just because she had autism alone. And they'd be like, "Whoops, aren't our words coming back to bite us?" And I write that down and put that in a letter of understanding. And it takes time. And you said, what did two working parents do? When we were with the CPAC and when we were going through this hell and muck, we worked around the clock. I mean, I'd be up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, not only preparing lessons, but at the same time researching the law and, writing letters of understanding and rewriting things, and rewriting emails and CCing and BCing. And, it was crazy. It was craziness. And, I wish there was a better solution, but I think record keeping is key to any of this. And there's also a great website that I just didn't want to forget to tell you guys about called Rights Law. I'm sure I'm not telling you something you don't know, but it's WRIGHTS law. And it's a husband and wife team, and they have written books that I've gotten. And we found tremendous information on that site alone. So
Need to get them to do a webinar for us on a specific topic. That
yeah,
would
they're
be
excellent
so
if
helpful.
they're still doing it, right? I mean, like I said,
That's
my
I'm trying to
daughter's
look now
24.
because right, we don't know, but it definitely still exists, and a lot of people
Okay.
mention it.
Okay.
A lot of us who have your experience, Jody, we didn't, you kind of lose a lot of time. Like in my perspective, you caught it early, right? Before, because it kind of got like bad quick. You know, a lot of us is
Yeah.
like the slow burn, and we don't really know what's going on, and we're trying to like figure out what to do about it. Um, but you, and how many years ago was this? I mean, you don't have to date yourself like that, but what are we talking?
No, that's
Because it
okay.
hasn't
My
gotten
my
better,
daughter
is the point.
My daughter entered preschool at the age preschool disabilities at the age of 3. Her preschool experience in this district was phenomenal. I couldn't speak more highly of her teacher, of anything. The minute she hit kindergarten until she was in second grade, it was hell.
So second grade is
And
when you moved her.
like middle of second grade, yeah. I pulled her out. She was just turning 7, and she stayed in New Beginnings in Fairfield until she was 21.
Was that an
And
out
then,
of district placement?
yep, that they paid for completely. I did have an attorney help me with like the aftermath of everything, because then it was the third party busing and people who weren't qualified. That's how I met you, Kai, being on the bus advocacy website, because we could have a Jillian's law and no Jillian right now. We've had so many bad experiences with that. That's a whole nother issue. Um, but you would think, I would hope, as a past educator, that, you know, I worked I worked with some of the best and most dedicated, still, who are still teaching in under all this pressure. It that I could ever imagine. And they cared for every child in that classroom and picked up on and could get them into the reading program that was needed. And, INRS, I don't even know if that even still exists anymore, but that process of getting them, uh, 504 and, prior to having an IEP, and trying to do the early intervention that way. And they teach before school and they teach after school. And I would hope that every educator is like that, but as we know, they're not. And,
Well, that's the thing, right? Not every district is bad. And I know my experience doesn't label the whole district, but they are a part of the problem,
mm,
or were, I should say. However, two bad adults doesn't make the whole district
no,
bad.
no, that's very
But
true.
I never saw my children walking away with forever friendships with any of the teachers that they had.
Yeah.
Not like how it was for myself growing up, where you
Right.
had that one teacher that made the most tremendous impact.
Yeah.
And today she is an aunt to my children. And
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And, the other one, they were invited to our weddings,
Yep.
and that's something, and it's hard, right? They don't have time to really have those friendships. But what I see, though, is personally, is a lot of favoritism. So,
Mm, that's
in
unfortunate.
my town alone, I can see the favoritism every day on the social media pages where this person who works for the district will only reply to said parents. They won't respond to anybody else. And in fact, sometimes they'll come with a snarky comment. Um, Instead, how about you don't talk with them, or you treat everybody equally? Like,
And why are we friends with our teachers presently? That,
exactly.
like,
Like,
we used to do that in the olden days, but like that
right,
was
where
then
you
the
actually had to
rule.
see them in person and such,
Yeah.
like where, but now it's, you're talking, you know,
I mean, on Facebook, like, why are we like openly friends with our child's teacher and talk? Like, to me,
right.
that's a big conflict,
It is a conflict, but you got the favoritism,
Yeah.
and yeah, someone may wait until they are no longer, there.
Right.
They're still doing the same thing. You are showing favorites towards another student who had the same kind of issues that one child did,
Mm.
and that's not okay. Like, mm-mm.
Well, and
No.
especially if HIBs are filed against somebody who has a child of a board, is a
Right.
child of a board member,
We
or,
don't
you know,
know
the
any of that, though.
cheerleaders
We'll
or the
never know.
football, you know, things happen and nobody's going to ever be treated equally. And it is unfortunate. Um, you know, we can't solve all of these issues, but I think that if we can solve the accountability to education issue, we're going to be in a good place. And I really want to reiterate, because I know we're past an hour now, that that's what this work is all about. It's been our experience that our education tax dollars are not accountable to education. They're kind of
Now,
accountable to just kind of keep us in a school,
Right.
Would
no
you
matter
please
what.
explain that, what that exactly means, Kai Collins, to the people in the back? What
What
does that mean?
accountability means.
Yeah, explain
Okay.
it.
Yeah, sometimes I forget because I've lost 3 years of sleep trying to figure this out in my mind, what went wrong. And, you know, when you're looking to a district, to a judge, to an attorney to place a child in an educational environment, I think everything is backwards. It is said that we are a member of a team. When things go wrong and we don't agree with our team, they end up testifying against us in court. So the whole team falls apart. And you realize that really, if you don't agree with everything they want, you're not a team member, you're an adversary. So you know your child and you're accountable to your child, right? If all of this per pupil revenue, because I looked mine up, I found I was $24,000. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no education happening here. And it's been 3 years and they now want us to do summer school. Um, it's not accountable, and I'm the only one that's accountable to the outcome after the school age years, right? So all of these people making these decisions on where the money goes and how much of it goes and where the education is going to occur, none of them are accountable after the school aged years. We are, and our voices are not heard. And the people that we entrust our kids with, who are our educators, their voices are not heard. And so then our kids' voices are not heard. So accountability is families, educators, and our kids. And that's where accountability lies. And if the dollars aren't accountable to all of us, and we are more than any of the administrators and judges and attorneys and anybody outside who's making all these, we're more. So if we can come
We're the
together,
stakeholders.
and we are, thank you for using that word, stakeholders. We are the stakeholders, we are the taxpayers, and we are the only ones accountable to outcome, and yet none of us have a voice in this conversation. That's the work we're doing this year. If we can get our voice, we can make a lot of change, and we can make change that is going to work, not just shoving legislation through like we see happening, you know, in other states. Like we really have to come to the table and talk this through because it's incredibly complex. The way the money is distributed and the source of funding is complex. The needs are very diverse, and we don't want any type of threat in this conversation. If you feel threatened by a conversation to your child's education, you're in the wrong conversation, right? Like if it feels threatening, it's probably not the right conversation. So we're trying to create the right conversation here so that we can all come to the table and have this dialogue, because if we don't start talking about our reality, nothing changes. And I don't think we're better off than we were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but yet our investment keeps growing. And so there's a disconnect, and we've got to figure out what that is. And so, Deanna, or if anybody else wants to say anything, the only other thing I want to end with is a quote. I want to, you know, try to end these webinars with a quote, gives us something to think about because I love quotes. If you know me, I live by quotes. And so I'm going to share one, but I'll give everybody an opportunity to say a few last, you know, things that maybe we can think about until our next webinar. And if nobody has anything, then I will wrap it up.
Hold on, please. I'm trying to get everybody to answer the poll for today.
I didn't know what that was. Okay.
And I'm relaunching it right now.
I answered it. Okay, I'll answer again.
Will providing parents a draft IEP allow them to become more of a member of the IEP team?
Of course.
That's a good question.
Why should it be hidden?
Well, exactly. But my point is, if they are creating the draft, that means they are creating it without you, just as if we walk in, they
True.
already have it there. So,
Right.
how do we ensure that we are a part of the team? So,
Yeah.
that's yet to be told because this is going into effect, in which it's great because we want parents to be a part of the team. But if they are drafting it without the parent, you're not a part of the team. And this is something I am really stuck on personally because I always felt like when I walked into those meetings, I was always judged as soon as I walked in. And they always had in there that I didn't send my kids to preschool. Oh my goodness, did they even realize why preschool was invented? It was invented for working moms to be able to go to work. You know,
Right.
I didn't want to pay extra amounts of money for it. So let's see, only 5 people answered. I cannot answer since I created the poll.
Oh, I'm
Well,
just going to
I'm
say that. Look, I'm sorry to interrupt. But I think yes, okay. They had to create some kind of draft to work off of. But
Hmm.
you getting the draft beforehand allows you to take a look at it and be like,
Hmm.
this is, not like making lots of notes, and it doesn't mean coming to the table as an adversary.
Right.
But
Gives you the knowledge and the foundation to build upon.
right. And the best outcome for our child is that we have good relations with our teachers and our CST members. And no, that's not always the case. I mean, for God's sakes, I have voodoo dolls, I'm sure, in my district. Every time I get a pain, I'm like, whoop, there it is. But and I'm an educator myself. But I I think, that's what we want is good working relationships and coming to the table and saying, I have a lot of questions. A lot of times they breeze through these IEPs. I used to stop IEP meetings and be like, whoa, we're talking about a kindergarten parent. Let's talk about that page. So before, it gets to that, let them tag up the pages and be like, I have no idea what this is. Please explain it to me. Doesn't mean that you're being adversarial.
Exactly.
So I don't have a problem with a draft being
Uh,
sent to me as long as I get to have my input in the draft because
Exactly.
I'm the kid's parent.
It's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to think about that because I'm like, well, if they give it to me, is it predetermined? Shouldn't we be sitting around the table? But what it does is it gives you time to digest what they're going to shock you with, or not, at the time of the meeting because it's a foreign language, these IEPs. I'm a college educated person and looking at that
Hmm.
really gives me anxiety and just knowing that that's a legal document. It's very important that we have the right goals in there and the right everything, even the parent concern section. We need that's kind of everything. It's what is going to be relied
Oh, yeah.
upon if things go wrong. So it's important, and any more time we can have to review, I think is helpful.
Hmm.
And I
And
would
it's a fluid
certainly.
document. It is not written in stone. You can call an IEP meeting whenever you want.
And that's a great point because that's what is so terrifying for parents is they think, oh no, if I sign this, it's done. And if I miss something, it's over. And it is fluid. And I put that to the test and they were very accommodating, with adding something that needed to be added, quite honestly, because things were not happening. So we needed to, really document how many times these things were going to be happening. And it did get added very quickly. So it is a fluid document. Thank you for saying that. If we forget something and things are not working well, we could always go back.
And the tighter, the better.
I worry about the parents that don't understand it. Like there's a lot of
A
lingo
lot.
in there, and some parents may not understand. And yes, they have that great, span to help them, but span is overwhelmed because of everything that is going on in our system. So they
Hmm.
can't help every parent. Look at them. Raquel used to be one of them. I think I still go back and I question myself every single day for something I missed in those IEPs.
Don't we all?
I learned
We're learning by our
too.
mistakes. It is what it is. I really wonder if every parent going into these meetings should just have, like the district has representation. Why
Checklist.
can't we have representation for
checklist.
somebody who knows the landscape before we walk into it like blind, right? We walk into this not knowing what we are about to walk into. There's 10 people around a table and there's a document and it's about, our child.
It's
And
intimidating.
it is, it really is.
But that's what these groups are for. And you can call upon somebody that lives by you and say, hey, want to come with me? You can bring whoever you want to a meeting.
And you
It's
can.
like-
And so in my mind, CPAGs would be a great place to start there because they're in every school. And if everybody knew that there was a CPAG and there were parents who knew and they were there in your
Mhm.
school and they would be more than happy to attend a meeting with you, that's where
Mhm.
that could start.
Absolutely.
And that could start quick, right? Like we could really get that going quickly so that if somebody was walking in having never been to an IEP meeting, they could find somebody in their CPAG
Call on a parent.
that would be
Yeah.
able to go in with them.
Great idea.
So
great
let's
idea.
think about that because these groups are severely underutilized. I didn't even know we had one until my neighbor told me about it this year. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And there's like 5 people there. But, we need to use what we have and make it meaningful.
Right. Right.
So let me close with my quote.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'd like to close each webinar with a quote. Tonight I chose one that feels especially fitting as our organization has faced some tough attacks this month. And in those moments, we've had to remind ourselves why we started this work. So tonight, we would like to leave you with this. What we don't understand, we fear. What we fear, we judge. What we judge, we try to control. And what we can't control, we attack. The work we are doing is about putting families back in control of their learners' education because we are the only accountability measure. It's really that simple, and it is also what makes it the largest hurdle we are going to have to clear. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. I know this was a tough one to show up to because, nobody really understood what it was going to be, but hopefully if it's available on the website now, you can kind of see the discussions that we're having. And, maybe we have one of these once a month on top of the expert panelist webinars, because our goal this year is to really build some content and have a place to house it. And we want to hear, from parents' experiences, real conversations about the challenges so that we can find the solutions. And that is it for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask that for every person that is on here, if you could share the Facebook page and the groups and the website with just a few people, it can make a difference and it can help show exactly what it's about. It's not about politics. We are transparent. We are bipartisan, but most importantly, we are parents who have dealt what we've been dealt with and don't want to see it happen to someone else. And that's all there is to it, is to make sure it doesn't happen again.
This is a great organization. I'm so glad I was able to be here. Thank you.
Jody, I'm so glad that you found Kai on that group.
On the bus group.
I always say when we have like a bad day, something happens, we make another connection.
The eagle.
Yeah, there was an eagle flying over Deanna's house when this attack started happening. And we're like, you know what? That's an eagle. That's a beautiful sign that, we just have to keep pushing forward with this conversation because it's important.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Jody, we didn't meet for happenstance. It was no coincidence. There's a reason we found each other.
Like
and I think that, we're going to be talking very often in the coming months, I hope.
Well, I'll dig out all my old notes because
I'm thinking about it.
A while.
Know where to find you.
You absolutely do.
All right.
I
Thank
still
you,
have my
everybody,
CPAC
so much.
binder. So Okay. Have a
Thank
good
you
night,
so
everybody.
much. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you soon.
Take care.
Good night, all.